I'm here with two good friends. Louise, who is the executive director of iCivics. And then Norton is the CCO of Filament, which is the game development studio that ran with iCivics from the very beginning. We'll talk about it. Just to frame it, yeah, we'll talk about the success of iCivics for sure and things we can learn from it. But I also want, in my questions and your questions, to speak about things that maybe were tough and were not so successful, and again, we can learn from them. We'll start with your intro, guys. I know that each one of you has one slide to kind of give an overview, and we'll start with iCivics. Cool.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming by and listening to our story. iCivics has been around since 2006, originally as our courts. We are the legacy of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who was obviously the first woman on the Supreme Court of the United States. We are now, from her little idea and a great deal of determination, we are now the largest civic provider in the country. By which we mean 5 million kids were taught in this past year. With us is our Chief Education Officer, wave, Emma. Emma's very much responsible for this, as is Dan on my left here for making the games. We have 19 games, and they are the core of iCivics. The idea is that you really cannot understand about our democracy without playing a game. All of our games are a role-playing game in which you are at the center of the action. So I will just mention, one of you asked me about Win the White House, which is pretty much responsible for this great rise in traffic over the last year. We had the game you run as a candidate. So you are running with your own agenda. You choose what the agenda is. You run for the primaries. You realize very quickly that if you want to win, you're going to have to go for electoral votes. So maybe some of us didn't. Anyway, you look at the map. You find out where you can win. You go and put in public appearances. You raise money, and then you win or lose. So that's how you get to understand how this country works and how the electoral process for the US works. So all of our games are structured that way. In November, this past November, we had 3 million game plays that month alone. And those are similar to commercial gaming sites. So we were really, really proud of that. And we now have 170,000 registered teachers with iCivics. And it's been a great story of success. And as Asi points out, it's not always easy. There are many things that have gone wrong over the time, but we thought maybe it might be interesting for those of you who are starting out. What are those key elements, those key ingredients to success, which we'll talk about. And with that, over to we need to click.
Let's talk about Filament.
All right. Yeah, so I'm Dan Norton from Filament, and we helped, pretty much. We're a design and development studio in Madison, Wisconsin. We focus exclusively on learning games and games for positive impact. And yeah, we've been doing it basically arm in arm with iCivics. We started just around the same time. Some of our first titles were iCivics games, and our two organizations sort of grew up together.
Not that we're old or anything.
No, we're super young. We're super young.
You just started very early.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one more thing for context. Those of you who know that I was involved with Games for Change for many years. This is a very unique project. Maybe there's nothing like it in the sense that we're not talking here about one game. And we're not talking only about the development of one game. This is a project that is running for 9 years, And during that time, how many games now? 20, 21?
No, 19.
19.
19. We have 2 digital tools. We have many other things which we should talk about as well.
And we'll talk about the other thing, but in terms of games, we're talking about 19 games, which is a very broad body of work. And it's really a portfolio. In terms of penetration, you talked about the numbers, it's also being used by 50% of US teachers in social studies in middle school level. So we're talking about, in our space, a very unique success in terms of being sustainable, penetrating year over year, and this is one thing that I want us to emphasize today, that how others can repeat that success or that type of, let's say, tough journey. Then I wanted to ask you, because you started with iCivics from the very beginning with a small studio or out of school maybe, how the progress of iCivics went with your progress as a design and development studio?
Oh, that's interesting. We learned a lot of really critical lessons about good game design while making games with iCivics. Just offhand, I think 2 of the early ones is we learned that systemic rules are great for making an engaging experience, but it's really important to have a really good bedrock of real content. The iCivics people always loved to write and always wanted to create comprehensive content, tons of writing, tons of character dialogue, tons of things to do and read inside the space. So I think, you know, most game designers have a deep affection for system structures and rules. And then sometimes you can kind of think of like, oh, well, then there's a spreadsheet with some words on it that gets poured in later. But iCivics really demonstrated that the strength and quality and quantity of the written word inside a game can have a huge impact on how good it is.
Can I just want to make a connection with what Connie was talking about in, there are 2 things about that. First, it's not surprising that we started with Jim G. And his focus on language acquisition, right? Because that's really part of the benefit of iCivics is partly you understand the system, but you also understand the vocabulary that you need to grow as a student of government and the law. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that games really are very good at teaching that, and games with content are really particularly good at doing that. So, so the content embedded in the game. So in this way, I think that commercial gamers might be different than educational gaming, in that many of the commercial gamers will try to build a structure in which you pour content in because that's cheaper to do. I think if your purpose is truly educational and learning, and you go at it that way, you're going to fail. And we have intentionally never done that, and always remain very close to the content and the design. Now, that is a very expensive way to do it. It also is the reason why we're successful. So you pick your point.
So maybe we'll jump into the elephant in the room. Obviously difficult times, right? I mean, doesn't matter which side of politics, even though I'm guessing that 90% here are probably on one side, but let's say no matter which side of politics you are in the US, hard to deny the level of divide, you know, how much the political discourse is declining, and the 2 parties are not working together. And you guys, you are sitting in DC as iCivics. How what's going on in the news and current events is affecting your mission? I mean, is it you know as usual, or are you really changing things around it?
Yeah, so that could be a topic for a whole hour. So we may be the only benefiters of the situation. I think the first thing to say is that it's become increasingly difficult to remain nonpartisan. Not because we don't try, and not because that is the core of our mission, but because what we put out has to have a view of some kind. So if you're playing a role-playing game, you will have to ask students to take one side, right? So we have in some of our games like Executive Command, we have a policy position which is, for example, about environmental rights. At this point, some of these positions are now thought of as partisan.
Yep.
They weren't a year or two ago, right? And we've been sort of challenged by that to say, okay, well, how do you defend this? We've responded, first of all, we are very careful about this. We review all of our content for nonpartisanship from both sides. And it goes through a process that Emma runs, and that we make sure that, you know, it is also a band of positions which are reasonable, within the reasonable mainstream. And we make sure there are positions that would be more attractive to the left as to the right. As these definitions of left and right are changing to orthogonal things that we've not seen before, we're also going to have to adapt as well. So that process has really challenged us. It's not as easy to open a game. Filament is a little bit, you know, we have to pay them. So, you know, there is a process that is difficult to do. We won't be able to be an everyday responding whatever happens on Twitter, but we will have a commitment to remain nonpartisan entirely. In addition to that, a lot of people are saying, why are you teaching about this system? It doesn't work. Right? Our belief and our strong belief, and in this case we are nonpartisan, doesn't mean you don't believe in anything. We strongly believe in our institutions. We strongly believe they will survive, and we are strongly committed to making sure that kids will actually learn the system so that they will become involved in the system so that the system will work, right? This is not this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people don't believe in the system, it will not work because people need to be involved in order for the system to be. So I'll leave it there for now. Because
so it sounds like you're looking at it as a temporary assault on the system, but the foundations are there to stay, and you want the kids to understand that. Then, as a game maker, are you seeing feedback from players, parents that was not there before?
Yeah, I mean, Louise said it well. I think at a certain point, iCivics games are about how government functions. So if you think that whether or not government should function is a political question, then every iCivics game is political. It's just unfortunate. That's how it is. If you believe in government, we're at a time when there are people who don't. And that's now a common part of discourse, is that maybe we shouldn't have government. So yeah, we're talking about it, and we're trying to be nonpartisan. But yeah, like Louise said, just the container, just being like there should be room to discuss the purpose and value of government. That container is now a thing that is being discussed, is like, should we even have that? And I think at that point we say, well, yeah, we should. So that's kind of where we are. It's weird times, man.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to where we want to focus on game making and everything around it in terms of getting it into the hands of players. We talked about success. Let's talk about the challenges as well. I mean, you know, challenges. I mean, that people can take away. Challenges that you successfully dealt with, or those that you're still struggling with, and until this day you're looking for answers, maybe from both of your perspectives.
Sure. I mean, so let's see. We made a synchronous/asynchronous multiplayer game for Facebook once. That was
not around.
Don't do that.
No.
That was a doozy. It was a cool game, but holy cow, that platform changed every 10 minutes. That was brutal. Another great mistake. Okay, I'll tell this story. This is good. We had a very successful game called Do I Have a Right, in which you run a law firm and you help people with their constitutional challenges. They come into your office, they tell you their problem, you guide them to a lawyer that specializes in the right that addresses their issue. It's lovely. We're remaking it right now. But we had a bug in which you received 0 points for helping people with their Second Amendment rights. Yeah, it had to be the second, right? So, so the emails started coming in like, this is on purpose, So yeah, that was a hot fix for sure. Let's see. So those are 2 fun anecdotes. I think broader tactical mistakes. Well, there was a fair amount of time when Louise wasn't there, so that was unfortunate.
No.
So now you're there, so that's much better. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
So I'll tell the other side, not from the gaming, but from the distribution side. And this is something that is good and bad. So when you start out, right, you want to go to your strengths. So you want to go to your networks and whoever you know, and that's how you build adoption. So we came from Justice O'Connor.
Mm-hmm.
Justice O'Connor is obviously very big in the law. So therefore, she goes to people in the law, right? And so those people talk to people, and in the end, we have a network of about 50 state ambassadors who are really sort of judges, lawyers, volunteers, whatever, groupies to Justice O'Connor or something, and they then go talk to teachers, which doesn't sound like a good strategy, and it really isn't, honestly, but it worked. Somehow they got enough teachers. It wasn't so much from them, but because the games were filling a niche, right? So that's one. So all this sounds great, and we're cooking away with these networks. At some point, the networks become amorphous. They need a lot of help. They keep calling. You have no staff because nobody pays you to run a network like this. And you're like, what do I do with these people who were really, really helpful at the beginning and really not that helpful now? We're in the schools already. We need professional trainers, and teachers are talking to teachers. So not having been able to see what that network would look like in 5 years was kind of, how much can you do? But had we started with an idea about, how we're going to do this, we might have put in structures in place that would have made these networks much more productive for us long term. So,
This is a good segue. I wanted to ask you about, this transition from, again, what many people in this community are doing, which is a one game project, one project that has a very strong mission, and they put everything in it, and then they move to something else. What made the transition from this to a multi-year project with network, with tours, with work with the schools? I mean, how that transition worked for you? When did what was the decision made then, or at the very beginning that this is going to be a different type of project?
yeah.
There was, in fact, very early on, there was a monolith game proposal. We were going to make a game called Guardian of Law, and it was going to have all the things.
Everything.
I have the poster.
Yeah, right? It was going to be this big, broken down, lawless landscape that you used like an unlimited quantity of mechanics to recreate the entire world by increasing the order of law. It was going to be all the games at once. Alan Gershenfeld, actually, once we presented this, Alan Gershenfeld from Eline said, "This looks great. Never make this." He's like, start working on small things, explore, find a brand, mitigate your risk, and build a library that you can move forward with. And I was so mad. But yeah, he was absolutely right. And now the ability to have the portfolio and the ability we can revisit topics or expand one piece at a time. The budgets are more manageable. The timelines can be placed strategically, more or less.
And some of them are succeeding more than others, right?
Yes, right. That's the thing, right? So if some games are better, then some games are less better. And that's okay when you have a broad multi-game strategy, right? And some games are big and some games are less big. And it gives you so much more freedom to maneuver on all of the variables when you're tackling, even though it is one content area, right? The size and shape of all the objectives inside that content area vary extremely widely. So I really think the portfolio is great. I think, one other thing, sorry. By making the games in a smaller shape, they also are a better natural fit to a lot more of classroom type plans, right? So if you have a game that you can get in and get out within a class period, maybe even a half hour if you hustle. It's not just, okay, now it works in the classroom, but it just works in a lot more circumstances. So smaller games that explore a concept, they should be long enough where you get enough depth and anatomy of the objectives that it's worth playing. It shouldn't just be a trivia game. But it should be short enough that it can fit into a lot of different types of plans, either prescribed by teachers, or someone just wants to play some more when they get home, or whatever. So yeah, it's almost all advantages as far as I can tell with the broad pool of smaller games as a portfolio.
So you're signing that we need to conclude? Okay.
Oh.
Can we have one question from the audience?
So Amy is previous education. Really love all of your games. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the content versus game design sort of feedback loop, because you do use a lot of content, but do you go to teachers and say, hey, what do you think of this game? And if they like certain things, like how do you put, I know you have lesson plans, you have all sorts of things that interact or that build out the game to be really classroom friendly. So how do you guys work together on that, and what's your timeline for those sorts of things?
So we have been partners with Filament for quite a long time. At some point, we put one of our people in their office. And she is a teacher, master teacher, taught middle school social studies, and is a great fit with the team and is a member of the team. And so Carrie is kind of like the feeder, and so is Emma, is everybody for that kind of teacher impact. We survey our teachers every year. Usually a minimum of 1,000 teachers respond. So there's a lot of input on an ongoing basis. We have a network. Instead of the State Ambassadors Network, now we have 90-person teacher network. They use social media. They get us out. They are fantastic people and just great educators. So that's a real feedback loop for us as well. So iCivics is just more than the games, more than the lesson plans. It's kind of a community now.
Thank you very much, everyone, and I'm sure Dan and Louise will be happy to answer your questions when you meet them in the hall. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.